She spent hours trying to be perfect, but she never felt good enough. She didn't think she was pretty. She didn't feel loved. And the more she tried to please others, the more she lost herself. Until one day, she looked in the mirror, and everything changed. If you've ever felt invisible, this story is for you. Because at the end of the day, if you don't love yourself, who will? Laura had just turned 39 and didn't feel beautiful. Actually, she had never felt beautiful. She looked in the mirror every morning with a mechanical resignation, brushing her hair as if she were tidying someone else's image, not her own. She had a routine and stuck to it strictly. Wake up early, prepare breakfast for her 2 children, pack their lunches, tidy up the house, and head to work. Laura was the kind of woman who didn't leave dishes in the sink or clutter on the couch. She kept everything in its place, except herself. She wore discreet clothes, tied her hair up to avoid calling attention, and always wore a neutral expression. Her colleagues at the school where she worked as a secretary said she was sweet and helpful. Laura is lovely, they said, and she really was, for everyone, all the time. But never for herself. She didn't remember the last time she did something just for her. When she tried to recall, all she found were memories of taking care of others. Her mother, who had become emotionally dependent on her since her father, passed away. Her ex-husband, who left saying he didn't feel admired. Her children, whom she loved above all else, but who often saw her as just the background figure who made everything work. Her self-image had been eroded by years of living to please. Her reflection had become a stranger, a tired woman with dark circles under her eyes, dull skin, and a body she no longer recognized. One morning, something small but meaningful happened. Laura was getting ready to leave when her youngest daughter, Clara, 8 years old, looked at her and said, "Mom, why don't you ever smile when you look in the mirror?" Laura paused. The question hit her harder than expected. "I guess I don't notice," she replied softly. "I smile," Clara said, turning to the mirror and making a funny face. "Sometimes I pretend I'm a movie star." Laura laughed, almost instinctively, but deep inside, something shook. When was the last time she had looked at herself with admiration? Or even kindness? That day, at work, her thoughts wouldn't leave her alone. Between answering phone calls and organizing documents, she kept hearing Clara's voice. "Why don't you ever smile when you look in the mirror?" At lunchtime, Laura found a bathroom with a full-length mirror. She stood in front of it. First, she looked out of obligation. Then, curiosity. She examined the lines around her eyes. They weren't ugly. They told stories. The subtle stretch marks on her waist. Marks of a body that had given life. Her skin, not as firm as before. Still hers. Still real. She took a breath, and for the first time in years, didn't look away. That was her. Not a failure. Not invisible. Just a woman tired of forgetting herself. That afternoon, she did something unusual. She stopped by a bookstore, bought a notebook. On the cover, it said, "Love yourself like your life depends on it." That night, after the kids were asleep, Laura opened the notebook and began to write. Day 1. I don't know how to love myself, but I want to learn. It became a ritual. Every night, after putting the kids to bed, Laura would open her notebook and write. At first, they were short, hesitant sentences. She wasn't used to looking inward. Writing about herself felt like speaking a foreign language. Day 3. Today I smiled at a compliment instead of brushing it off. It was strange, but good. Day 7. I put on lipstick, just for me. My mother asked if I was going out. I wasn't, and I smiled. Little by little, those small victories began to create cracks in the wall she had built around herself. One night, prompted by a video she saw online about self-love, she decided to do something new. She would write a letter to herself, the way she used to write love letters to others. This time, it would be for the person she had always left for last, herself. She sat on the bed, opened the notebook to a blank page, and began. Dear me, I know I've been distant, cold, harsh. I've called you names I would never say to a friend. I've judged you for not being enough, not being thin enough, young enough, pretty enough. I've demanded perfection from you, while giving everyone else permission to be human. I'm sorry. You've endured so much. You've given love even when you felt empty. You've smiled through pain. You've stayed silent to keep the peace. You deserve better, and from now on, I promise to try. I promise to listen when you're tired, to care for you as I care for others. I promise to stop hiding you. I want to see you. I want to love you, one day at a time, with love, me. When she finished writing, Laura felt a lump in her throat. That letter, so simple, was like turning on a light in a dark room. She placed the notebook on her nightstand and lay down. She didn't sleep immediately. Her mind wandered through memories she had tried to forget, comments that hurt, moments she silenced her voice, times she wished she could disappear. But for the first time, instead of feeling crushed, she felt the beginnings of something new. Not confidence, not yet, but awareness. She was finally beginning to see herself. 2 weeks had passed since Laura began writing in her notebook. Something had shifted, subtly but undeniably. She hadn't changed her wardrobe, hair, or makeup drastically, but people noticed. Not because of how she looked, but because of something different in her presence. A new energy, a lightness in her voice, a warmth in her eyes. One afternoon, while waiting for the coffee machine at work, a teacher named Camilla approached her. You look happier lately. Did something good happen? Laura thought for a moment. I started looking at myself, she replied, smiling. Camilla laughed. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. That simple exchange stayed with Laura. For so long, she had believed her only worth was in what she did for others. Now, she was beginning to understand that just being, existing with intention, was enough. But not everyone welcomed this shift. At her mother's house the following Sunday, Laura wore a colorful blouse she hadn't worn in years. As soon as she entered, her mother frowned. You're all dressed up. Going somewhere? No, just felt like wearing something I like. Her mother raised an eyebrow. You're not like this. Are you seeing someone? Laura took a breath. No, Mom. I'm just learning to like myself. Her mother didn't reply immediately. Then, as she set the table, she mumbled, Just don't forget your responsibilities. You have children. That sentence stung. It was always the same narrative. If a woman took care of herself, she was selfish. If she chose herself, she was abandoning someone. Laura felt the old guilt creeping in. But that night, instead of stuffing it down, she wrote. In her notebook, Day 15. Today, I was criticized for doing something that made me happy, but I didn't let it undo me. I'm not being selfish, I'm being whole. It was a declaration. Breaking the pattern wouldn't be easy. Every step toward herself meant confronting expectations, habits, and old beliefs. But she was no longer afraid. Each page she filled was a small rebellion. Each truth she wrote was a seed planted in fertile ground, and she was ready to grow. The transformation Laura was experiencing was mostly internal, quiet, and personal. But one afternoon, everything she had been working on was put to the test. It was a Friday at the school where she worked. The teachers were organizing a small celebration in the lounge, coffee, cake, and casual conversation. Laura, as always, had helped arrange everything. She was great at making things happen behind the scenes. But this time, something unexpected occurred. Camilla, the same teacher who had complimented her weeks earlier, called her over just as the principal walked in. "Laura, come sit with us," Camilla said with a smile. Laura hesitated. She wasn't used to being invited to the center of things. Usually she stayed near the door, organizing plates or collecting napkins. Still, she walked over and sat down. The conversation was light, full of laughter and stories from the classroom. Laura contributed little comments, and, to her surprise, they listened. They laughed with her, until the principal interrupted with a joke, one Laura had heard too many times. Laura, always the quiet one. The perfect assistant. I bet you don't even know how to get mad. Everyone laughed. It wasn't meant to be cruel, but Laura felt exposed. She smiled politely, but said nothing. And that's when it hit her. The mask. The one she wore for so long. The one that said, "Be pleasant. Be useful. Be invisible." That night, after putting her kids to bed, Laura sat down with her notebook and wrote with trembling hands. Day 22. I felt small today, like I didn't have permission to exist outside the version of me others are comfortable with. But I do. I do have permission, even if it makes people uncomfortable. She stared at the page for a while. Then, for the first time, she cried. It wasn't sadness. Not really. It was grief. For all the time she had swallowed her truth to make others comfortable. It was rage. For all the time she hadn't stood up for herself. And it was release. For finally seeing it all clearly. The next morning, Laura woke up with swollen eyes and a calm heart. Something had shifted again. She no longer wanted to fit the mold. She wanted to break it. The following week brought a new kind of challenge. On Tuesday afternoon, while Laura was working at her desk, Camilla came by again, this time with an invitation. There's a women's circle this Saturday at the community center. It's a safe space where we talk about self-love, identity, life stuff. Would you like to come with me? Laura froze for a moment. She had never been to anything like that. Her weekends were always reserved for chores, laundry, groceries, things that needed to be done. I don't know. I have a lot to take care of on Saturdays. Camilla smiled kindly. Then maybe it's time to take care of yourself. That sentence lingered. That night, notebook open, Laura wrestled with the idea. Her first instinct was to say no. It felt indulgent, unnecessary. But a small voice inside, the same one she had been getting to know, whispered differently. Day 26. I've never said yes to myself before. Maybe it's time. On Saturday morning, Laura got dressed with care. Nothing extravagant, just a soft blouse she liked and a necklace she hadn't worn in years. When she arrived at the community center, her hands were cold with nerves. But as soon as she walked in and saw a circle of women, of all ages, shapes, and stories, something in her relaxed. They shared things she had only written in her notebook. Insecurities, pain, victories, stories of strength and vulnerability. When it was her turn to speak, Laura hesitated. Her voice trembled. But she spoke. I'm learning to look at myself, really look, and for the first time, I don't feel ashamed of who I see. The room was quiet. Then came the nods, the tears, the smiles. Camilla gently placed a hand on her arm. That's the beginning, she said. That night, Laura didn't write in her notebook. Instead, she stood in front of the mirror. She looked at herself, eyes still shining from the tears, heart full from the connection, soul lighter than it had been in years. She smiled, not to pretend, not out of obligation, but because she meant it. It had been a month since Laura wrote her first sentence in the notebook. Her routine hadn't changed much. The kids still needed breakfast, the job still required effort, the world still moved at its usual pace. But inside her, everything was different. She no longer rushed past mirrors. She didn't avoid her reflection. She looked. She saw. And she stayed. On a quiet Sunday morning, Laura stood in front of the bedroom mirror. Clara was on the floor nearby, coloring. Laura examined her reflection with curiosity, not criticism. Her body, real and alive. Her face, no longer weighed down by shame. Her presence, whole. Clara looked up and smiled. "You're smiling. Again, Mom." Laura turned, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Again?" Clara giggled. "You used to look like you were in trouble when you saw yourself. Now you look happy." Laura knelt down and hugged her tightly. "That's because I finally believe something very important." "What?" Laura whispered in her ear. "That I'm beautiful. Just like this." It wasn't about outer beauty, though she saw it now. It was about reclaiming the worth she had handed to others her whole life. That night, Laura took out her notebook one last time. Day 31. "I don't think I need to write every day anymore. I found my voice. I found my eyes. I found me." She closed the notebook and placed it in her drawer, next to old letters, children's drawings, and tiny keepsakes of moments she had once forgotten to value. But this one, this version of her, she would never forget. Laura stopped trying to be everything to everyone. Instead, she chose to be someone for herself. And that changed everything. If this story touched your heart and awakened your self-love, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with a friend. Tell me in the comments what you are going to do to love yourself more.